Lessons for Life on a Monday night, coming to you live at the later than scheduled time of 10 p.m. And Pete is here with me, regular, loyal servant to the show. How are you doing, Pete?
The signal's not very good. I keep freezing, or you keep freezing.
That's all right. Ghost in the machine. Could be a metaphor. Look, we're going to roll a video. We're talking about human nature tonight. What is the human nature? Islamically, there is this concept of the fitra, which is a certain sort of disposition that we're all born on, an inclination to worship the one true God. Let's listen to what Sheikh Hamza Yusuf has to say about that.
People are believers before they're disbelievers. The assumption about people is belief before it's disbelief. Because belief is a fitra state. Isn't our deen al-fitra? Don't we believe that people are actually by fitra inclined to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So their inherent state is belief. And disbelief is actually a state that comes later because of arrogance for whatever reasons. But these are too severe, you're making things too it's just simple kuffar. This makes everything easy. Just Red Sea, split it. We're on that side, they're on that side. Well, not me. I'm a convert. Okay, so I know what it's like on both sides. Because I've been on both sides. And by the way, kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas, you were the best people, past tense. No, seriously. That's the tafsir. Read it for yourselves. Muslims talk about kuntum khayra, and they think like it's present tense. We're the best people. No, what are you doing for humanity right now? Where's your great medical discoveries? Where's your aid to starving countries? What are you doing for Darfur? What are you, I mean, seriously, what? Just tu'minuna billahi, right? And then what? تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. It's not just iman billah. You have to be actually out there doing things to get the khayriyah in this ummah. But that's a past tense. كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ. That group were all converts.
So, is it our natural disposition to believe in God? If we're not brought up in any other religion or not brought up to be an atheist, will we naturally believe in God? Pete, are you with us, or are you still having technical difficulties?
I caught the last bit of his talk. Yes, I think that if we are souls inhabiting physical bodies, and our souls have therefore an intrinsic connection with the Creator as a spiritual reality, and without the soul our body's just a lot of dead flesh, then I think that he has a real important point, even though the empirical scientists can't prove it yet.
Do you remember what you believed when you were very young? Did you think you would have believed in God if you weren't told about a creator?
Well, I don't remember, because before my memory started to kick in, my mum, a staunch Anglican, said prayers with me every night, although I don't remember any of it. And at the age of 7, she said, Peter, look up at the stars. I looked up at the night sky in the winter and immediately felt frightened and enthralled and captivated at the same time, thinking those stars, the winter stars, just demonstrated God. So, and also all the Hollywood epics about Jesus just stirred me to the depths. So I find it very easy to believe in God.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a nature-nurture debate on this, and they do say if something is prevalent in every society, then that is a suggestion that it is something innate, something built in to our genetics, our DNA. And in every culture in the world throughout history, they have always believed in some kind of spirituality. There's been very, very few atheist societies, and communism, which only really spread in the 20th century, although it did cover about a third of the world, which is kind of atheistic on a doctrinal level. It is against religion. But apart from that, there haven't been many atheist societies. People have always practiced, whether it's monotheism or polytheism, some kind of spirituality. And I'm sure Islamically, people like Sheikh Hamza Yusuf would say that monotheism is the original practice or form of belief. I don't know. Some people say that Hinduism is the oldest religion in the world, and that has thousands and thousands of gods. But if you go back far enough, are those gods just different representations of the one true creative God?
Yeah, well, I don't think Soviet communism is a good representation of socialism, because I think it was created by business interests. And I think the atheism and the hostility to religion in Soviet communism was artificial. Because if you look at the origins of the labor movement in Britain, a lot of them were Methodist Christians, or it was built on Christian theology, a lot of the original thinking. And also the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. Is it Nicaragua? Yeah, Nicaragua. They were working very, very closely with the liberation theologists in the Catholic Church to build welfare for the ordinary people in Nicaragua. So I think the Soviet Union is an effort to give socialism a bad name.
Okay. And would you say that Jesus was a socialist?
Yes, but not. But a socialist who is very skewed towards the spiritual rather than the material.
I guess people forget there was socialism before Karl Marx. Marxism is not the only form of socialism. Let's have a look at the Christian concept of original sin. As for the Christians, the nature of the human is that we are born into original sin. Here is somebody else's clip. I don't own this, but hopefully they don't mind me.
Hey, welcome back to Clean Cut, where we can talk about the truth about just about anything, as long as we use logic and common sense.
This season, we're talking about the various elements of grace and the work of salvation. And today we'll talk about original sin, which led to the unredeemed state of the human soul. So how did we come to this point? In ancient times, there was a man named Adam. He was the first man, and he lived in a safe location which we call the Garden of Eden. Not only that, but God had given him many amazing gifts that modern man doesn't possess, with the greatest of those gifts being immortality. Adam could not be killed. Not only that, but the vast majority of sins just weren't open to Adam. He couldn't steal, or murder, or commit adultery. There was only one sin that it was possible for Adam to commit, and it required a very direct and deliberate act of disobedience to God. In fact, it was such an easy sin to avoid that when Adam committed that sin, the consequences were devastating. You see, Adam wasn't just one man acting on his own behalf. He was the father of an entire species, and his actions had consequences for all of his children and their children and so on. His act of sin damaged both his body and soul, depriving him of his immortality and giving him an inward temptation to do evil, which he previously hadn't possessed, and which we call concupiscence. Because of his sin, therefore, we all have a terminal illness, mortality, and the inner temptation to do evil. This is passed on through our very blood from father to child, and this is what we call original sin. Now, as great as the loss of immortality and the purity of our natural inclinations were to Adam, there was a much bigger obstacle associated with original sin. God, being perfect, could never condone even a single sinful act, especially one that so easily could have been avoided. This obstacle is bigger because the nature of God is literally impossible to change, even for God himself,
And to condone any evil would require God to change drastically from what he is, to the point of no longer being perfect, and therefore no longer being God. Because of this, the perfect divine justice of God needed to be satisfied before man could be brought back into a perfect union with him. For this reason, original sin made it impossible for people to be reunited with God after death, no matter how holy their lives were. We'll talk a little about that in the next episode when we discuss the unredeemed state itself, but for now, I want to take a look at the usual objection to the story of Adam and original sin. Eating a piece of fruit? Really? Is that really worth condemning someone to death and misery for the rest of their life, much less an entire race of people? Well, the problem here is that eating the fruit wasn't the only part of the sin. In fact, it might not even have been a sin if not for one thing. God had commanded Adam not to eat it. Adam's primary sin was defiant disobedience of God, not just eating fruit. He disobeyed God despite having every inclination not to, and no good reason for disobedience. I've heard a few theories on why Adam disobeyed. In the story, Eve, the wife of Adam, is tempted by a serpent and tempts Adam. It's been suggested that the word used to describe the serpent in the Bible doesn't really refer to a snake, but to some kind of large creature like a dragon or sea serpent, and it certainly wouldn't be the only time that Satan has ever been compared to a dragon. Faced with a creature like that, it's possible that Adam might have felt pressured by it, in spite of his immortality, so his emotions might have affected his actions, preventing him from properly using his reason to make decisions. However, I don't think that's likely. In any case, there's nothing in the Bible itself to indicate that Adam even met the serpent, though I suppose Eve might have been intimidated by it. I think more likely it was just a matter of peer pressure. Eve was enjoying this fruit, and Adam wanted to share in whatever she enjoyed, because he wanted greater closeness with her and was willing to disobey God and risk his relationship with God in order to make that happen. St. Thomas Aquinas wrote that it's most likely that Adam was aware of the horrible effect that the fall would have, both for him and for his children, but decided to do it anyway. I think that's probably true, and it would certainly go a long way towards explaining why his sin had such overwhelming consequences. Next time we'll look at the unredeemed state, to see what it was like being unredeemed. That's all for now, so keep asking questions, and thanks for watching.
Cheers. Original sin, Pete. Is that something you can get your head around?
I don't really believe it. I think it's more likely to be a psychological device by the church to control people.
I mean, is it biblically sound? Where's the suggestion that we are all born evil?
I don't agree.
Is this one of those? Is it one of those ideas that came later? What would your Anglican mother say about all this?
I think my mum probably had a view about sex or concupiscence, which was more like the sin, guilt, shame, and sex is dirty brigade nonsense.
Okay,
so I didn't agree with my mum's attitude to.
Okay.
That, really.
There's a lot of that in the church, and obviously celibacy.
Islam as well. Traditional Islam's obsessed with sex as well as the church.
Yeah, but not celibacy. So the men of the cloth in the church have to be celibate. The monks, the nuns.
Yeah.
Islam rejects this monasticism or asceticism.
Even so, traditional Islam is still obsessed with sexuality everywhere. So it seems to be.
Well, what's wrong with that?
Well, to me, it sounds like a device of religion, where religion's been co-opted by vested interests to turn religion into a political control device, get them all obsessed with sex, so they don't think about social justice or the corruption of the people at the top, or the abuse of political power and so on, and they don't question authority. So to me, it looks very, very convenient for the vested interests to use religion in that way. So to me, sin is far more to do with oppressing other souls, restricting their freedom, restricting their ability to enjoy the spiritual emancipation, spiritual enlightenment, spiritual empowerment from the Word of God, restricting their creativity, their innovation, their freedom. and I think it gives religion a bad name.
What about this concept of sacrifice and having to make up for the sin, and the idea that Christ was sacrificed in place of the justice, which would have been to send everyone to hell because we're not good enough?
Well, I think, I don't know, in my own personal experience, I feel an impulse to sacrifice myself for those I love. And I don't really understand it, but I can feel it. But I don't know how effective or valid it is. I mean, I think in the Quran, I get the impression from what Dr. Taj Hagi says that you can't stand in for someone else. We are all the agents of our own salvation or our own damnation, depending on our own choices. And we can't really, this idea of vicarious atonement, you can't do something to save somebody else. We're all, for example, Ruhia Khanum said to Shoghi Effendi, now that I'm your wife, am I safe spiritually? He says, no, your soul is in the palm of your hand. So we're all agents of our own spiritual destiny. And
is it every man for himself and woman?
Well, if we care about somebody, we want salvation for them as well, but we can't. I think, doesn't Shoghi Effendi say we can't force anybody to be good? We can't force someone to take the good path. We're responsible for ourselves, but we can't force anybody else to. We can inspire them, but it's their choice whether they respond to the inspiration or not. So I think this idea of saving somebody else, I don't really understand it very well. I think it might be true, though. I mean, if we can pray to God to save somebody else, then he can be kind to them or forgive them or whatever. I'm not sure we can do it ourselves, though. I'm not very scholarly in this area, so I don't really know.
You're a modest man, Pete.
I'm not confident I'm right, definitely.
No. Well, look, I know you believe strongly in the concept of unity and the oneness of mankind.
But unity in truth, justice, and peace, not unity in a pack of lies.
For sure. But I've often wondered, what if our salvation was collective? What if we had to save everybody? And if, like when the teacher keeps the whole class behind, maybe we're meant to work as a team and save the whole world rather than just think of ourselves. Wouldn't that be selfish if we were only concerned with our own salvation?
Well, in the writings it says truthfulness is the foundation of all virtues, and without truthfulness there can be no progress for any soul in any of the worlds of God. So I think the best way towards unity is to be truthful and to be honest about who we are and what we are, and truth in that I think is valuable. But I think unity at any cost isn't. And I think there's a passage by Baha'u'llah, page 167 of Tablets of Baha'u'llah, where he says that if you take unity too far as a concept, you might be guilty of ignorance and fanaticism. And that unity has its place, but it's not, you don't take it too far. So I think unity is good, but I think unity is valuable if everybody is empowered and encouraged to be truthful, honest, to be themselves, not to act, and have these virtues. Otherwise, it's tainted in some way, like unity is strength at the beginning of V for Vendetta.
Evening, gentlemen.
And here's Mac joining us live. Well, thanks for coming in, Mac. How much have you caught so far?
Sorry, I didn't get a chance. So
That's all right.
Michael Jackson, where are we up to?
Yeah, tell them it's human nature. We're just debating or discussing the concept of the fitra in Islam that says we're all born with an inclination to worship the one God, and contrasting that with the concept of original sin in Christianity, where everyone is born a sinner and not good enough for salvation without accepting the sacrifice of Jesus, that Christians believe he died on the cross for our sins. How about the concept of sacrifice in Islam, Mac? I mean, a lot. You've always mentioned to me about Ashura and what happened in Karbala. That's a concept of sacrifice, isn't it? Wasn't that a sacrifice for the greater good, or for the salvation of the ummah, or the continuation of the religion?
Yeah, I mean, you could say exactly that. Hussein was a sacrifice for the religion. Yeah, absolutely.
So does that mirror the Christian story slightly? Is there something in our fitrah that wants a story about sacrifice? Even, I mean, this all is a mirror of Abraham sacrificing, or being willing to sacrifice his son. It happened again with Jesus, did it or didn't it? But something like that happened, and it happens again at Karbala. And there are probably other religions that have a similar story or concept in their tradition.
So in pagan times, I mean, when you look at it, it's always sacrificing to the gods. And I mean, when you even look at the Mayans, they used to have, I mean, rip out their hearts and throw them into a fire ditch or something. But it's always been a common thing in paganism, I believe. Like, even before the Abrahamic religions, it was a ritual that used to exist, I believe, no? I mean, I think that's why one of the tests that Abraham had about the lamb. I mean, the reason why he had to take his kid and chop the kid's head off, because he wanted to see if he's still with the old pagan ways. Wasn't that the test?
Well, that was, from what I've understood, that was common at the time. That was the practice. So it was perhaps not a surprise for him to think or mistakenly believe that God wanted him to do that. But I think it's oversimplified to say God tricked him or said, sacrifice your son, and saw if he was willing. It was more that's what Abraham thought he was meant to do.
Yeah, it's a test.
That was the practice of the time.
Yeah.
You know,
there are all kinds of things.
There you go. Yeah, cultural, exactly.
I think it's cultural. When I was studying architecture for 1 year before I dropped out in 1974-75, one of the books we were given to read was by Lewis Mumford, called something about the city. I can't remember the title now. But it started off saying that in the city-states, way back in Sumerian times, or maybe earlier, according to the author, in order to placate the gods, so to speak, and get more rainfall for the crops, they had the habit originally in the first cities of sacrificing the king. So they would murder the king because he was the most valuable person in society, in order for the gods to bring the rain and allow them to eat. So, of course, after time, the king thought, well, I'd rather somebody else would stand in for me. I don't want to sacrifice myself. So in the end, it started to become the case eventually where instead of sacrificing a perfect youth, a perfect teenager, or a perfect child, because of Jewish faith, it turned into sacrificing pure animals, spotless lamb in the temple. And also, apparently, according to his book, he said, well, it turned into, well, let's sacrifice the populace of the city down the road so that we can get. So it produced war, because if a people didn't want to sacrifice themselves to placate the gods, they go down the road and sacrifice somebody else's people instead. So it created war. So it seems to be a cultural practice which started with sacrificing the king to get the gods of nature, the sun god or the moon god or whatever gods, to give them good weather so they could eat.
Wow. Sacrifice the king. Normally it's the other way around.
Well, it is now, yeah. Sacrifice the people for the king, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And soldiers are still sent to their death for king and country.
Yeah, 20,000 in the Somme in one battle against machine guns from the Nazi side, not Nazi, German side. Yeah,
horrendous. Yeah. All right, chaps. One more video clip. See what you make of this. This is Alan Watts. He goes quite deep.
Between the way in which most human beings experience their own existence and the way man's being and nature is described in the sciences, I was pointing out that in such sciences as ecology and biology, the way in which they describe human, animal, and insect behavior is in flat contradiction with the way in which most of us experience our thinking and our action and our existence. We have been brought up to experience ourselves as isolated centers of awareness and action, placed in a world that is not us, that is foreign, alien, other, which we confront. Whereas, in fact, the way an ecologist describes human behavior is as an action. What you do is what the whole universe is doing at the place you call here and now. You are something the whole universe is doing in the same way that a wave is something that the whole ocean is doing. Because if we don't experience ourselves that way, we mistreat our environment. We treat it as an enemy. We try to beat it into submission. And if we do that, comes disaster. We exploit the world we live in. We don't treat it with love and gentleness and respect. We cut down millions of acres of forests to turn it into newspaper, of all things. Lovely trees turned into information about nothing. We kick the world around in revenge for feeling that really we are puppets which the world kicks around. So my main point last night was then that we need a new kind of consciousness in which every individual becomes aware that his real self is not just his conscious ego. You know, let's take a headlight of a car. The headlight shines on the road in front. The headlight does not shine on the wire which connects it with its own battery. So in a way, the headlight is unaware of how it shines. And in the same way, we are unaware of the sources of our consciousness. We don't know how we know. There was a young man who said, though, it seems that I know, what I would like to see is the I that knows me when I know that I know that I know. And so we are ignorant of, we ignore, it doesn't come within the scope of our attention how it is that we manage to be conscious, how it is that we manage to grow our hair, to shape our bones, to beat our heart, and to secrete all the necessary fluids that we need from our glands. We do it, but we don't know how we do it. Because you see, underneath the superficial self, which pays attention to this and that, there is another self, more really us than I. And if you become aware of that unknown self, the more you become aware of it, the more you realize that it is inseparably connected with everything else that there is. That you are a function of this total galaxy, bounded by the Milky Way, and that furthermore this galaxy is a function of all other galaxies. And that vast thing that you see far off with telescopes, and you look and look and look, one day you're going to wake up and say, why, that's me. And in knowing that, you see that you never die. That you are the eternal thing that comes and goes, that appears now as John Jones, now as Mary Smith, now as Betty Brown, so it goes forever, ever, ever. Now then, why I've made this point as an introduction to what I want to say tonight is the problem of the relationship of man and nature. Most Westerners, whether they be Christians or non-Christians, don't trust nature. Of all things, nature is the thing least to be trusted. You must manage it. You must watch out for it. It will always go wrong if you don't watch out. You know, the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. So we're always feeling that you can't trust it. See, we're absolutely instilled with the idea of original sin. You can't trust nature because it comes out with weeds and insects. And above all, you can't trust human nature because if you don't hold a club over yourself, you'll go out and rape your grandmother. Now, the Chinese would say, if you can't trust yourself, you can't trust anything. Because if you can't trust yourself, can you trust your mistrust of yourself? Is that well-founded? See? If you can't trust yourself, you are totally mixed up. You haven't a leg to stand on, you haven't a point of departure for anything. A man of true virtue is therefore a human-hearted man. And the meaning of this is that one should, above all, trust human nature in the full recognition that it's both good and bad, that it's both loving and selfish. Now, let me give an illustration of the wisdom of this. When people fight wars, I trust them if the reason for which they fight a war is to expropriate somebody else's possessions and women. Because they will fight a merciful war. They will not destroy the possessions and the women that they want to capture. They want to enjoy them. And that's a war based on simple, ordinary, everyday human greed. The most awful wars that are waged are the wars waged for moral principles. You are a lousy communist. You have a philosophy that is destructive to religion and to everything that we love and value and reverence, and therefore we will exterminate you to the last man unless you surrender unconditionally. Such wars are ruthless beyond belief. We can blow up whole cities, wipe people out, because we are not greedy. We are righteous. If you are going to do something evil, do it for a plain, honest, selfish motive. Don't do it in the name of God. Because if you do, it turns you into a monster who is no longer human. A sadist, a pure destroyer.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing to the channel for more. It helps us.
Please do. There's a lot of powerful things there. I mean, a war for greed is more moral than a war on principles. I think Alan Watts was a Christian who became a Buddhist and then eventually kind of did away with labels altogether and was just an amazing philosopher. But a lot of what he said there resonated with me. I don't know what you think, Pete, that war.
Well, I think that my perspective is that the way forward is not to be completely human as an individual, but to be completely human in relation to the revelation of God, whether it's the Torah or the Gospel or the Quran or the Akdas or the Bayan or the Upanishads or the Tripitaka or the Analects or whatever book it is. And to me, the kernel, the core of spiritual transformation, to whatever extent is possible for a selfish, instinctive, animal-based human being, to whatever extent, to die to self and ego, to realize how small and significant we are in the cosmos, and to glory in our smallness in the midst of this incredible creation. Not to think that that cosmos is us, but to feel, well, I am in this infinite cosmos, and I feel at one with it, like a hippie 1960s cosmic consciousness. Not that I am the cosmos, I'm not. I'm an individual, tiny little ant on this speck of a dust in a sunbeam. But nevertheless, I feel a connection. And that connection is possible because God has created everything. And I think when, like the Christian concept of being born again, when we die to self and ego, to whatever extent possible in this instinctive human frame, and try to do our best to live a little bit according to the revelation of God, it transforms us spiritually. And we're no longer completely obsessed with our own survival, our own food, our own shelter, our own pride. But we think, well, there are higher powers at work. You know, if I survive or not, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to do my best while I'm here and hope that God will, you know, fulfill his promises perhaps, and allow the spiritual transformation to take place well, for a Baha'i, whereby we become a little bit like Abdu'l-Baha, the perfect example, and allow the spiritual forces, that are the mysterious forces of his revelation, to take over and make our lives magical, and hopefully make, through our transformation, help the transformation of the whole world. Like Baha'u'llah says, I've not made you like followers of Christ, fishers of men, but quickeners of the whole of mankind. So by our transformation, we are catalysts for the waking up and the transformation of the whole world, as predicted in the Quran and all the other holy books. The paradise to come, like Jesus' words, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. At the time of the last day, the day of resurrection, so on.
And what is the ego? Where are we getting this word from? Is that a Greek word?
Just sense of self, and I think it's, I don't know, I suppose it's related to the negative human emotions of defense. It's a kind of, from evolutionary biology, I would imagine it's a psychological device in our brains.
Isn't it interlinked with desire a bit? It kind of like, because you to be egotistic, I mean, you gotta have certain desires, and if you don't get your way, well, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like, yeah, I'm wrong.
I always think of Freud when I hear about the ego and the id, which is another concept or another part of the human psyche. But the ego would seem to be the selfish part of a human being.
I get the impression that ego is simply a device in evolutionary biology to defend ourselves against threats. Like,
okay.
What's it driven by, do you reckon? That's what I'm saying. It's driven by desires, is it not?
Physical survival. Physical survival. Because if we don't survive, we're not likely to...
But that's still a desire. Desiring to survive, to live, right?
Yeah, but that's how evolutionary biology works. What works produces survival in the next generation. So it's self-reinforcing. Anything that
So
works.
why are we taught to fight against that? And why did Buddha say that desires are the root of all suffering, and to end suffering you have to let go of all desires? Is that talking about the ego?
That's what I thought. That's what I assume. I mean,
and
that's why I thought
I'm sure that Islamically we're talking about the nafs here, the self, and the greater jihad being, I mean, you mentioned it the other night, Pete, jihad and nafs, the struggle against your own nafs, your own self, your own ego. That is the greater jihad.
Well, didn't Sigmund Freud talk about it being the defeat of the ego by the superego? So
maybe he did talk about the superego. Yeah, weird guy.
Altruistic, idealistic self, trying to get us to do what's right for the benefit of everybody, not just ourselves.
Mr. Trumpy88 is saying, own nothing and be happy. Yeah, if you let go of all desires, maybe you would be happy with nothing.
Yeah, but most of us are ordinary human beings. We're not saints. So, you know, that's putting the bar very high, I think.
For sure. I mean, Mr. Trump is obviously making a reference there to the World Economic Forum, which we do sometimes talk about on this channel sometimes. Yeah, I wish I'd got something Buddhist up on the screen. It's been very Abrahamic this evening.
So I don't think we have to be holier than thou, sanctimonious saints to please God. We can just be ourselves and look after ourselves as well as look after everybody else. I think that not fighting, but hoping for and working for the benefit of all mankind, it doesn't mean we have to be poverty-stricken, homeless beggars. You know, in the Baha'i writings, it's clear that Baha'u'llah wants us to enjoy life and to be happy with ourselves and not, you know, dress in sackcloth and be aesthetics and so on. So I think that, you know, if we're building the oneness of mankind, that includes us. We're part of, and if we want the best interests of everybody, that includes us as well. So we're supposed to be happy, to enjoy ourselves, to enjoy life, but to work for the well-being of everybody on the planet, you know. And ultimately,
so as someone who hopes for this world unity, how do you react to the current global institutions such as the World Economic Forum, such as the United Nations? Do you think any of them are showing the spiritual capacity that you might hope for?
Well,
or are they secular in the fact that they are worldly? And if you really want to unite people, you've got to unite the hearts and the souls, not the bodies.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I get the impression that these movements are looking for the material prosperity and unity of mankind, socially and politically and materially, and it's not enough, because we are not animals. We're not physical bodies. We are sentient souls, and that therefore the real unity of mankind, or the real unity of all the sentient beings on this planet, because I'm not convinced we're all ordinary humans, the union of all these sentient beings, to me, is through spiritual transformation, not through atheists running the World Health Organization trying to turn us all into good communist citizens or Soviet citizens, but and not, you know, religious theocracy turning us all into, you know, citizens of Gilead or Ayatollah Khomeini's Iran, but into, you know, fully rounded, sensible, ordinary human beings who have a spiritual element of their lives, and they accept all the religions as being different facets of the same God, living in peace together. So not to be too extreme in any of these directions. You know, not unity at any costs, but you know, Baha'i writings basically, but but to me, not an interpretation of the Baha'i writings, which goes hell for leather for unity at all costs. I don't like that. But something.
Am I right? The Baha'i faith is the only religion that's represented on the UN, or what's their role within the UN? Do they not have some kind of influence there?
Yes, but you know, my research.
What is that role? What am I referring to? Because I'm butchering my attempt at explaining it.
It's a Baha'i institution which is called the Baha'i International Community, which has consultative status with ECOSOC, the Economic Social Council of the UN.
Consultancy status, okay.
Yeah, so it gives.
And no other religion has that. Am I right?
I don't know.
Okay,
it gives advice, but it's not that advice isn't necessarily taken up by the UN.
Okay.
I'm starting to actually get more interested in Baha'i. I want to actually look into it more because some of the things that you've mentioned has obviously hit home with me as well. So it's especially in the last couple of episodes, I need to delve into it a lot more, and that's because of you, Pete. I'm not going to lie. So thank you for.
Yeah, we appreciate you coming on here, Pete, and sharing your knowledge and your life experience.
Yeah. It's amazing, and honestly, I'm going to have to relook over Baha'i and the whole situation, because I've obviously took the wrong impression, and you've showed me different. So I appreciate that much. I appreciate that very much. Sorry.
Well, my impression is that the UN is flawed, perhaps philosophically in its foundations, because I mean, I don't know it in any detail, but I get the impression from certain sources that it's based on a group of people who regard themselves as followers of Lucifer, Luciferians, and they changed their name because they understood that the name Lucifer wasn't very popular, so they changed it to the Lucis Trust. So it seems to me
Wow.
possible that the ultimate foundation vision of the UN is not necessarily very helpful. And I imagine that unless the UN is reformed in terms of its basic philosophical foundation, it's going to get paralyzed because the people of the world aren't going to accept it anymore, especially in light of what the WHO's been doing. And it's going to get replaced with something else. And maybe the Commonwealth of Independent States, which is what the USSR turned into. So if the BRICS countries, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the BRICS countries produces already a huge number of countries that are queuing up to join it, produces an alternative to the UN, that might be the way forward. Or maybe the UN realizing it needs to change and then building relationship with the BRICS countries, and then together, create the global peace conference that Mr. Trump mentioned about 8 years ago, which he said the time has not yet come for it, and then form a new world federal government, a bit of the UN, a bit of the CIS, and create something that really works, representative, representing the 99% of the mankind, not just 1%. Not trying to turn us all into AI clone robots with tons of transhumanist Borg implants in us, for goodness sake. And then mankind can, liberated from these evil forces, can start building, reconstructing civilization on a sane moral foundation. And hopefully with the Baha'i revelation making a contribution together with all the other religions to building a nice rounded comprehensive vision for everybody that everybody can sign up to. And we haven't got there yet. We as mankind, I think we're struggling to form a new code of morality that everybody can sign up to, and a lot of the issues are very confusing. How do we deal with trans people? How do we deal with gay people? How do we even understand our sexuality adequately? So lots of issues, lots of moral issues, which need to be hammered out over the next few hundred years, perhaps, or sooner.
For sure. And that's interesting. You said make a contribution rather than dominate. A lot of religious people just want their religion to be the way and nothing else. When rapture happens, it's going to be all the non-Christians taken, or when the Islamic State is formed, it's going to be one-way traffic. That's not how it should be.
Everybody should have a voice. Everybody should be heard. And some of our ideas are wrong. Some of us are making mistakes. I'm sure I am, but we need to be heard anyway. We've all got a part to play. And it's like that idea on the House of Justice. I heard a story that if they're discussing something on the House of Justice and 8 members put forward their view, and they think, well, is this the answer? And one person has a slightly different take on things. And instead of shutting that person down, all the other 8, they get very interested and they want to pay great attention to this one person. Why do they think what they think? What can we learn? So if one person can educate 8 people and for the way forward, I think that's a great example. It's like Peter Ustinov, the UN ambassador and actor, and raconteur. He once said in a public talk, to save the world, listen to the visionaries, the madmen and the fools. Because even if they're in the minority of one, they might have an interesting idea which is actually crucial to the solution to a problem.
That's right. There's something from the Bible about the stone that gets rejected will be the cornerstone.
Yep, that rings a bell.
Yeah. Pete, Mac, I appreciate you both coming on tonight. It's been a good one. Again, I should have just let you lot get on with it. But I've been chipping in here and there. Thank you for joining me. We will do it again on Monday night. Fig Tree, you're saying face blue, wide eyes. I wonder what that means. Fig Tree, where are you? You can have your say if you want before we wrap things up. Pete, do you know what that means? Face blue, wide eyes.
Well, face blue reminds me of Abdu'l-Baha, because even though he didn't have a blue face, a lot of his books are given blue covers, and I kind of associate the color blue with Abdul Baha.
Which
And in
is the
cover
color of
life, it means mercy, whereas red
what
is
blue means mercy.
yeah, apparently. So I was told in 1975.
Have you noticed in like boxing and competition, it's always the red and the blue, but I always thought it represented blood because while it's inside the body and it's not hit oxygen, it's not come outside the body, it's blue, and then when it comes out, apparently it turns red.
That's what it looks like in the textbook, but apparently that's not strictly true. It's just dark red or light red.
When blood is full of oxygen, it turns bright red rather than slightly crimson and purplish. Yeah, in the veins. Veins and arteries. Arteries are full of red blood. Hang on. Arteries are full of red blood. Veins are full of blue, deoxygenated blood that need to get renewed in the lungs with more oxygen to make them red again.
Yeah, I'm going to get queasy if we talk about that. I'm not good with blood. I don't know why.
Blue sky.
We all have pet peeves.
Blue ocean, a blue Pacific Ocean of peace in the west.
Yeah, can you be more Pacific? Face blue, wide eyes. Yeah. All right, Fig Tree. We'd love to have you on one night. You're always welcome. What's the significance of the fig tree, Pete? That's a spiritual tree, isn't it?
Oh, dear me. Well, I remember, didn't Jesus say if a fig tree or a date tree doesn't give good fruit and it's barren, or if a tree doesn't give any fruit, it's barren. And it seemed to be saying that a tree that gives fruit, a tree that's barren gives barren, and you don't mix them up. One tree will give fruit and the other doesn't. So maybe it was in light of you shall know them by their fruits.
I think he's talking about GMO. I think he's talking about the seedless grapes that we get these days.
Yeah, seedless grapes, they're GMO, aren't they?
You can make lots of money out of them, though, because the people have to come back and buy some more because the previous seed's not going to produce any more.
Yeah. Warning us about the GMO, and it's going to make us seedless creatures as well. Eating seedless food, you are what you eat, right?
It's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, seedless grapes. I don't know. All right, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. We'll get Fig Tree on next time, I hope. It would be great to hear from him. See you all on Monday night. Oh, wait, there's one more comment. Terminator Gene. That's from Mr. Trumpy. Oh. Well, on that note, hasta la vista. See you next time, gentlemen.
I'll be back.
I'll be back.